Bill, thanks a lot for talking to us. So we are following the news on possibility that UK denied the investor visa to Roman Abramovich, the Russian businessman. Of course, it's up to the migration service to decide. We don't know the details. But overall, how can you comment on such possibilities? And as well, what's going on with the London stance on the Russian business in UK regarding, and Russian businessmen in the United Kingdom regarding the whole recent development?
Well, I don't know the specific details of what what the British government is doing in connection with Abramovich. I'm just familiar with the same headlines that everybody else is familiar with. But what I can say is that there's been a lot of bad press about Russian dirty money coming to London over the last 12 months. There's been a lot of concern and fear about Putin's bad activities around the world. And that has heightened very dramatically with the poisoning of Skripal in Salisbury. And it's now come to a head, which is that the Prime Minister has said very clearly that they're going to have a close look at all the Russian oligarchs in London. And so it wouldn't be unreasonable to assume that some people start losing their visas. And we don't know whether Abramovich is one of those, but based on when there's smoke, there's fire. And so there's good reason to suspect that he may be one of the people in this category.
Bill, there were UK government warning that they might also use anti-money laundering legislation to go after the Russian business in the United Kingdom. What do we know and what is changing in the United Kingdom, especially after the Skripal case, after this possible poisoning? Because, you know, the talks were there for the last years, but what's new, what we can expect, what also going on, maybe an opportunity to have the Magnitsky Act in the United Kingdom?
Well, I'm proud to say that after 8 years of advocacy, 2 weeks ago, the House of Commons unanimously passed the Magnitsky Act here in the UK. Yesterday, it was debated in the House of Lords and supported in the House of Lords. And so we're moments away from having a UK Magnitsky Act. So the UK will fully join Canada, the US, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and Gibraltar in having a Magnitsky Act. It's particularly relevant here in the UK because this is where every self-respecting Russian gangster, Russian corrupt official, and Russian oligarch has a home, sends their kids to school, and has an ambition, if it all goes wrong in Russia, to get away to. And so London, while they're just starting to understand it, the British government has huge leverage here based on the attractiveness of London as the destination of choice.
So what are the chances the Magnitsky Act would pass, and in case it works, what would be the consequences for the Russian business in the United Kingdom, and also for the influence on the United Kingdom to, I don't know, to what's going on in Russia regarding the protection of the human rights of some of the people and the fight with the corruption?
Well, I think this is going to send shivers down the spines of Putin regime officials who are involved in terrible human rights abuses. There's a lot of people who've been involved in these human rights abuses. There's a lot of people who financially benefited from these human rights abuses. We've seen in the Magnitsky case that a lot of money came to London. And I think everybody is going to be panicking and wondering if they're safe, if their property is safe, they'll be able to travel here. And I think that will very much upset these people. You can't imagine the arrogance of the people connected to Vladimir Putin. They thought they could do everything and anything, and they thought everybody was bribable, and they thought every place was corrupt, and they could just keep their money safely abroad. And all of a sudden, these enormously wealthy, enormously arrogant people are finding that no, the civilized world is going to start closing down on them, and that's going to happen here for sure.
So, since you're an advocate for that, what are the next steps? What we should follow, to follow the case, to understand what is going on? What are the exactly next steps? And also, the second question is, what probably, besides Magnitsky Acts, what possible other sanctions could be placed? Are they discussed?
Well, the main next steps on the Magnitsky Act is that first the act has to be finally voted at the House of Lords. It then has to be given what's called royal assent, means the Queen basically puts her blessing on it, and then it becomes law. And then it only becomes possible, I believe, in next year or possibly in 2020 for the UK to independently sanction people outside of the European Union context. And this is an issue that we have to explore carefully. But in the meantime, we're going to try to get the first Magnitsky list put together, which will hopefully be an EU Magnitsky list initiated by Britain, which will replicate the same Magnitsky list which took place in the United States and in Canada. In terms of other tools that the British government can use against crooked Russian businessmen and oligarchs and officials, there's another very, very valuable legal tool which became a law a year ago, which is called the unexplained wealth orders. And the unexplained wealth orders basically says, if you have a lot of money and you appear to be crooked, that you then have to explain to the UK authorities why the money you have is honest. In other words, it reverses the burden of proof. Normally in the past, the government had to prove that it was dishonest, which is very hard to do. But now you have to say, this money is honest, here are the receipts, here's the contracts, here's the information. And this puts a lot of corrupt Russians in a very awkward position because, of course, they can't prove their money is honest.
And can you, again, maybe explain also to our audience, though we're talking about Magnitsky Act already for a couple of years, so what kind of people could be added to that list due to what kind of the activities? If it's not just is it just a corruption or any human rights abuses if we are speaking of possible Russian citizens, or should it be just Russian citizens or the citizens of other countries?
So the Magnitsky Act that was passed here is similar to the Canadian Magnitsky Act and the global Magnitsky Act in America. It doesn't just apply to Russians. It applies to bad, corrupt human rights violators from anywhere in the world, although it is named after Sergei Magnitsky because of the sacrifice that he made. And basically it applies to those people involved in gross human rights abuses and those people involved in kleptocracy. And it's an extremely powerful tool. It's a broad tool, and those people who didn't get their money honestly should be worried.
And Bill, today is already the second week since one of the Ukrainian prisoners, political prisoners in Russia, Oleg Sentsov, is on the hunger strike. He is there already for 4 years in the Russian Siberia prison. And as somebody who fought for the destiny of like another person like Sergei Magnitsky, who've been in the Russian prison but unfortunately had passed away, what would you say? What could be done else? Because when we're talking to the government here and the others, they say everything possible is done. So to what extent, what else internationally could be done to pressure the Kremlin in order to free the political prisoners? To what extent also the Magnitsky Act could be the tool?
Well, first of all, let me say that what's happened to Oleg Sentsov is an absolute horrific travesty of justice. This man shouldn't be in jail. His life shouldn't be at risk. And those people who put him in jail and put his life at risk in the Russian Federation should face the harshest possible consequences, including being added to the Magnitsky list. It's an obvious, clear abuse and a case that warrants the highest attention. As far as the Ukrainian government is concerned, they're not being truthful. The Ukrainian government has an opportunity right now to adopt the Magnitsky Act. The Magnitsky Act is going through the Ukrainian parliament. It's stuck in the Ukrainian parliament. The government could at any moment start to use the Magnitsky sanctions process even before the Magnitsky law goes through the Ukrainian parliament to sanction people involved in human rights abuses. The Ukrainian parliament or the Ukrainian government should do that as a matter of urgency against those people involved in the false arrest and persecution of Oleg Sentsov.
I would really go into the details because when we start to this communication with the government representatives, we would like really to say, so what exactly they could do, how the procedure works, because, you know, the general conversation, you should do that, that's an opportunity, ends up it like, we will look through that. So what are exactly the steps to watch out, which could be, as you say, easily undertaken by the different kind of officials to pressure on Russia using the Magnitsky Act as a tool?
Well, basically, it's very straightforward, which is who are the prosecutors, who are the investigators, and who are the judges who illegally have taken Oleg Sentsov hostage and persecuted him over the last 4 years. Their names are on documents. There's no mystery to who these people are. And those people should be immediately named and banned from entry into Ukraine. And if they have any assets in Ukraine, those assets should be frozen. And if there's any legal issues about doing that, then the Ukrainian government should immediately take over the Magnitsky legislation in Ukraine and push it through as a government initiative instead of as a parliamentary initiative and put it in place. The Ukrainian government has not done all that they could do for Oleg Sentsov. This is something they could do. This is something they should do for Oleg Sentsov. This is something they should do for the people who killed Sergei Magnitsky and other victims.
And if we speak about the United Kingdom and Canada, so how it works, probably the human rights lawyers would listen to this interview and would also consider some of the actions, because that's probably the pressure. The pressure from the Ukrainian side might be considered not that efficient by the Russian Federation. Maybe those people are more concerned about not traveling or not coming to the United States or Canada.
Well, first of all, I would say that Ukraine is in no position to demand that the United States bans them from traveling if the Ukraine still allows them to travel. So the first thing Ukraine should do is put its money where its mouth is. As far as the United States is concerned, absolutely that the family members and advocates and lawyers for Oleg Sentsov should immediately travel to Washington, should submit documents to the State Department and the Treasury Department of the names of the people in the investigator's office, in the prosecutor's office, and in the court who have been involved in Oleg Sentsov's persecution. The U.S. requires those real documents. Those documents are easily provided, and those documents should make a very plausible and credible case that those people should be sanctioned under the Magnitsky Act.
And also, you know, I think your organization also had written on that. In a couple of days, this week, the Economic Forum in St. Petersburg is up to the start. The Russian media are sharing information that there would be thousands of visitors from abroad, but there are some warnings of the foreign investors, traveling to Russia. While being an advocate for, against, let's say, dirty Russian money and this kind of a dirty business, what you would say, what is a general today understanding of the UK and international business cooperating with Russia? To what extent it would like to be back to the things as usual, and to what extent, you know, people are more concerned? So because we always have different signals. Some of the signals say that, oh, the businessmen would like to be back to trade with Russia and cooperate, that those sanctions are not there. Is this mood really there? And also, what is your warning?
Well, first of all, it's complete nonsense. If you look at the amount of foreign direct investment in Russia, it's dropped by 95% since the invasion of Crimea. It's just not true that there's huge demand from foreign investors. The second thing I would say is that any foreign investor who has done any homework at all would understand that there's a very high probability of you losing your money, of having people working for you being arrested and potentially getting killed. And so no normal foreign investor would take those risks. I don't know who these thousands of people are, but they're not the mainstream of the world, and they don't make up a large quantity of investment from abroad into Russia.